like nutritional therapy is incredibly effective, like super effective. Like most people who have, I mean, if you've just been diagnosed, you're quite likely to make massive strides, dare I say reverse.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Biospan podcast, which we are still yet to name, open to names for it. Today, we're speaking, it's myself, Maximilian, and Dorian. Dorian, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Dorian. I'm a nutritional therapist working with Biospan. Yeah.
Dorian, something I wanted to ask you, actually, is I never really asked why you got into nutrition.
That was my own experience, actually. I enjoyed a career of about 17 years as a shipbroker, which is like real estate with ships, to put bluntly. And I guess I was about, I probably was experiencing the same thing a lot of people do when they get into their 30s. You start to feel a bit slower, a bit more tired, that sort of thing. But that got quite bad around 34, 35. Actually, it was really bad. Like it was debilitating. And I went to the doctors, and I was actually diagnosed with an autoimmune condition called Graves' disease, which means you've got an overactive thyroid. Does lots of different things. I won't go into it too much here because that's not the point in this podcast. But basically, it just made me feel like total crap, basically all of the time. And I had a kid, and one on the way actually at this point in my life. And I did what they told me to do. I took medication, everything, and I just never felt any better. So I actually went to see a nutritional therapist, and that was it really. It would kind of open my eyes. I was someone who, if you told me nutrition could fix your health, I probably would have laughed. In all honesty, I was that kind of guy. But I had a complete epiphany there, and I got so into it that this is now what I want to do as a career, to spread the word to other people, so other people can know this, and hopefully people who are in similar positions to me can have that experience as well.
That's interesting. So, but you come along this whole way. You found out you had Crohn's disease, which was it's an autoimmune condition, and
that's right.
You saw a nutritional therapist. At that point, how did you find a nutritional therapist? What made you? What?
I think it was absolute desperation. I mean, at this point with Graves' disease, the standard treatment is you go on a drug that basically stops your thyroid from making thyroid hormone because you're overproducing thyroid hormone. So I was taking that drug called carbimazole or methimazole if you're in the States. It's the same thing. And I was basically saying now that you do that for a year and you just sort of then come off it and cross your fingers and hope to God that you go back to normal. They'll tell you like 30-40% of people or whatever it is go back to normal, and that didn't happen. So the next stage is you either ablate your thyroid by taking radioactive iodine, which basically gets sucked up by your thyroid, and thyroid's here by the way, which is why I'm pointing to my neck for anyone that doesn't know. That destroys your thyroid cells, so you don't have a thyroid, and then you take thyroid medication, or you take your thyroid out, you have surgery. And something about it, like, I'd very willingly gone along with everything that I was being told, but something just didn't sit right with me. It was, why would I take out a body part that regulates itself in a non-disease state, in a normal condition, and replace that with pills, literally hormone replacement? It just didn't sit right with me. Something didn't make sense. So I just started Googling and came to, this people talking about nutritional therapy and autoimmune diseases. But at this point, I was still like, what's nutrition got to do with your immunity? Do you know what I mean? So it was that was the start of the journey, and it was desperation. And I booked an appointment with a guy, and it's a completely different experience. For people who don't know and not familiar with the experience, when you see a doctor, you get 10 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever it is if it's a specialist. And it's kind of, these are my symptoms, this is the disease, this is the medication for the disease which helps with the symptoms. But when you see a nutritional therapist, you unravel everything. What are your triggers? What things have you been susceptible in your life to? What behaviours do you do? What's your diet? Obviously, there's a really good, I think it's Henry Ford quote, which is, if you always, I don't want to butcher this, but if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got.
Yeah.
Right. And if you are you doing something consistently over 30, 40, 50 years, and it's stopping you from achieving your goals, or it's giving you maybe a hormone imbalance or a metabolic imbalance or a disease or whatever it is, you need to do things differently. You need to unpack that. What is it? What is it that you do that's got you there? You need to unpack it.
I love that quote. But I was going to say I love that quote, but I've heard it. I think it's from Einstein's version, which is the definition of insanity. It's trying the same thing over and over and expecting a different result, which is like the same way. It's like the same way of saying the same. Yeah, a different way of saying the same thing.
Yes, exactly right. So my life is quite different in many ways to what it was then. I mean, not crazy different. It's like a relatively normal life, but the way I eat's different, and maybe there's some things I deliberately build into my life to try and make it more resilient.
From the whole time I've known you, it sounds like what you eat is quite nice, actually, and so like it does sound good. It's kind of, nutritional therapy has kind of opened my eyes up a lot. I mean, like, I get into work with you and Henrietta. I see exactly how the processes work, and it just makes so much more sense. And what I guess today we're here to talk about type 2 diabetes, mellitus. I've got a few questions. First, why do they call it mellitus?
That's a very good question, and it's not going to be one I can answer, actually. I haven't looked it up. Yeah, we can look it up after this show, maybe. I don't know the answer to that.
Oh, okay. Okay. The next one is, so you start with Graves' disease, but then what made you choose to do type 2 diabetes in your master's dissertation?
Yeah. So that was my dissertation. It was about type 2 diabetes, as you just said. So I just have, as I started getting into nutrition, and obviously, working with a nutritional therapist and stuff by myself, I obviously came out of that situation. I've still got my thyroid. I don't take medication. As I came out of that situation, going deeper and deeper into it, it's hard. The biggest thing is your metabolism, and how we choose to eat and live has an effect on your metabolism. And that effectively is what's happening with type 2 diabetes, a sort of end game metabolic dysfunction. And really, I think metabolic dysfunction plays a part in many diseases, maybe most. I don't think it's a stretch to say most sort of chronic diseases that we experience in civilized or Western, whatever you want to say, countries. Is an underlying metabolic dysfunction. So actually, I started going down that rabbit hole. And how metabolic dysfunction even relates to autoimmune disease. Autoimmune diseases can be very complex. It can be many, many different things having an impact, but metabolic dysfunction can play part of that as well. So I got really, really interested in that, and I think type 2 diabetes is kind of, like I said, end game. It's the ultimate expression of metabolic dysfunction, and that's why I was interested in that. And the other thing that interests me about type 2 diabetes is it's really like like nutritional therapy is incredibly effective, like super effective. Like most people who have, if you've just been diagnosed, you're quite likely to make massive strides. Dare I say, reverse. Even people who are sort of 8 years in on insulin have been shown to be able to come off. I'm not to say I can't say in all situations, but you can make massive strides with type 2 diabetes, and that's what really interests me actually, is that because the bang for your buck is massive. Autoimmune diseases are very complex. Other diseases can be very complex. I don't want to diminish anyone who's having issues with type 2 diabetes, but it can actually be, with nutritional therapy, it can be really simple in terms of backing them out of that.
I've got a question then, actually, and this is from someone else. They asked, let me get the question up. So we have 9 questions here, and the first question is:
Let's do it.
is it true that as a diabetic, all you have to do is keep the same food as before, but just eat less of it? For example, 1 potato instead of 3, 1 piece of dark chocolate instead of 3 pieces of milk chocolate, etc. And Megan added a note saying, "I think what they mean by this in a broader context is, should you just focus on calorie consumption and not on what the type of calories you are consuming?"
Yeah, yeah. So we could probably go back to that quote, couldn't we, about what you always do if you always done. um, the law of thermodynamics that determines energy cannot be made or destroyed is correct. So calories is a thing. There's no doubt about that. But I don't think that's a very helpful way to look at type 2 diabetes. Just looking at it from a calorie point of view. As an example, if we look at it from just a calorie point of view, as I have to move less and eat more, it would be obvious. One of the obvious, following that logic, the obvious thing to do would just go running all the time. And if you've seen like other advice I've given or other advice from this video, it's the opposite of what I advise from type 2 diabetes, because you're reducing your metabolism. In fact, if you actually diet, if you eat less, your metabolism will also adjust to that. And it is possible. I mean, there are, we have clinical experience of people who are actually eating quite low calories and they're still relatively overweight because their metabolism has adjusted down that's so low that they can be eating 1,200, 1,300 calories per day and they're not losing weight.
I've seen that.
If you think about this for a second, right? As a survival tool, what could be better than having a metabolism that adjusts to your environment? I mean, if you're going through a period of famine or scarcity, right, and your metabolism is the same no matter what, that's going to create issues. You might come to a point where, through our evolution, where you don't have enough food, you're going to starve to death. But if you've got a metabolism that can adjust downwards, you might make it through till the next time where you actually can get some food. And this is what our metabolism does. It's a moving target. Our metabolism is a moving target. It can go down, it can go up. And there are various ways you can make it do that. So I would say for type 2 diabetes, anything that reduces your metabolism and keeps it low, you're going to get stuck there. I'm not saying you cannot improve your condition, improve your glycemic control by reducing calories. You can, but how far and how much and how long are you going to do that for? If you get down to 1,300 calories a day, is that sustainable for the rest of your life? And bearing in mind you've then got a metabolism of 1,300 calories, what happens if you then go over that, or you say, screw this, I'm going back up? What happens then? Then you're screwed. You're worse off than you were before. And there are actually studies now that show, animal studies, right? When you diet down, if you diet down sufficiently to, so yo-yo dieting, okay? There are studies in animals which show that if you lose weight, if you restrict for a period of time, severely restrict, and then go back to where you were before, you actually add fat cells. Now, what with fat cells, our fat cells, right? They're actually when you get fatter or thinner, really what's happening is fat cells getting larger and smaller. When you're not getting it's called lipotrophic hyperplasia. It's like the adding of new fat tissue. Okay, so that's why the phenomenon of yo-yo dieting. What we see is yo-yo dieting. When you go down, every time you come back, you're a bit fatter, because what the body's doing is thinking we're in an environment where there's constant starvation. We've got to protect ourselves by adding new fat cells. As soon as we get calories, we want more fat cells. Okay, so that's the point of all this is, if you restrict, it's not necessarily restricting long term is not necessarily the best solution. You've also got to think about what's sustainable. Can you do a restriction for a long time? Reduce all your food for a long time. So I say no, that is not the best solution. There's obviously a psychological impact in this of restricting for long term. And a lot of people, maybe you can do it for 3 months because you're very motivated, but motivation is fleeting. It's just a feeling, like any feeling. It doesn't last forever. So Yeah, sorry, go on.
So what you're saying basically is that if you just if you just reduce your calories, eventually your metabolism is going to slow down as well as a survival mechanism because we're living in an environment of scarcity. There's not enough food, and so therefore to survive, we should lower our metabolism. And that means when you finally, if you do want to eat again, you're going to have a very low metabolism, so it'll be much easier to put on weight. And through research and studies, they found exactly the same thing in animal models. And humans as well. It's yo-yo dieting, isn't it? I mean, I see it all the time. I get people come up to me, and there's some people who've asked for like weight loss, and I ask them what they're eating, and sometimes it feels like they're lying, but like after a while, I realize they're not lying. Like they're not lying. They're literally eating 1,000 calories a day and not losing weight. Yeah. They're eating 800 calories a day and not losing weight, and at that point, it just becomes easier to put weight back on. Dorian, what do you suggest for these people?
Yeah. So, and well, to your point, you've got to think about quality of life here.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what life is that?
1,300 calories a day. You're going to be probably not getting your minimum nutrient intake at that calories a day. You're probably going to have a very low libido because your body will just say, right, okay, non-essential things, sex drive out the window, or androgen out the window. It's not sustainable. No, I think that you've got to. My initial thoughts with diabetes is you want to drop the insulin down, and we want to if let's say newly diagnosed diabetic, usually they're going to have very high insulin. This is not someone who's got no beta cell function after many years, but in the first few years, maybe after diagnosis, you want to drop their insulin down, and you want to try and regain insulin sensitivity. Insulin sensitivity is obviously central to like metabolic dysfunction. Insulin being the hormone that signals for blood glucose to go into our muscle cells, but also into our liver cells. And there's a number of ways you can do that. I would look at food quality. I think that, to begin with, I think low carbohydrate diets are very effective for type 2 diabetes. And I don't think carbohydrates are bad for you. I don't think carbohydrates cause diabetes. I just say that because obviously there's a lot of people out there that would criticise that, and I think that doesn't have to always be the case. But I think as a first-up intervention, I think low carbohydrates diets are extremely effective because they just reduce your overall insulin demand. And I think you're going to be looking at the type of carbohydrates you cut out specifically. For some people, it might be all starchy carbohydrates. For others, it can be less. Again, there's individual variance here. That's why it's good to work with the therapist. I think grains are very dense sources of starchy carbohydrates. I think they're a pretty good thing to cut out for most people who have any kind of metabolic dysfunction.
What are grains?
Again, grains as in oats, rice, wheat, barley, rye, this sort of thing. So you're not going to be eating bread or porridge.
No rice.
It's quite controversial because there's a lot of people say just eat. You can eat that stuff. It's healthy. Just eat less of it. I'm not saying it's not healthy. I'm not saying no one should ever eat that stuff. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that for a period to begin with, that will help lower your insulin. And if you lower insulin, your cells will try to start becoming more insulin sensitivity. That's not such a loud signal, so they need to become more insulin sensitive. Does this make sense? Does that make sense to you?
It makes a lot of sense.
So I mean, I've said in my video before, like if you want to test this, have some eggs for breakfast. Do your blood sugar before and after. Have a bowl of porridge for breakfast. Your blood sugar before and after. What you will see, even if you do equal calories for those, is that your blood sugar is going to be relatively stable at whatever level it is with the eggs, and with the porridge, you're going to see a spike, and that spike of blood glucose represents insulin demand. When there's a spike, you need insulin, right? More insulin. I'm not saying you don't need insulin for the eggs. You need insulin for protein as well, but it's just not the same level. Does that make sense?
Yeah. How long would it take for someone to start seeing benefits of insulin sensitivity? So someone's insulin resistant. It means their cells stop taking, they stop rejecting insulin. They've had too much, so you want to get your body to the point where they're sensitive. Your cells are sensitive again, and they start letting insulin back in. How long can that take? I know it's like how long's a piece of string, but what can people expect when they start implementing changes?
It varies. How old are you? What your sex is? What you do with the interventions? For some people, you can be looking at a 3-month thing. and then you can review your diet. Maybe we can change your diet a bit more. We can make it a bit broader, because and you'd be looking at markers of HbA1c. The ultimate marker is fasting insulin, right?
Mm.
That's the ultimate marker. But then taken in the context of what it's doing with your blood sugar, so your HbA1c, which is like 3-month blood sugar, your fasting glucose, but then also stuff like triglycerides and HDL, they're sort of markers of insulin sensitivity as well. So depending on what's going on there, and then maybe we can start broadening and testing things and seeing how, if it's real insulin sensitivity, or we kind of just hacked the system because we've removed carbohydrates, and go from there. So 3 months, but other people it can be a lot longer. And remember that when we're talking about type 2 diabetes, if you've got to a point where you're needing exogenous insulin, some of those people have beta cell death in their pancreas, and a low carbohydrate diet is not going to fix that.
Beta cell death.
Yeah. So the beta cells are the cells in your pancreas that produce insulin.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Prolonged high levels of blood glucose, as you would have in like a long time since diabetes, a prolonged period of diabetes, it destroys the beta cells in your pancreas. There's other theories on that. There's like theories that ectopic fat can gather around these cells and stop them from functioning. But essentially, prolonged diabetes, you tend to get beta cell dysfunction, and then what you have is a situation where actually your insulin can actually be low because you're not producing any yourself, and that's why you need to inject yourself with insulin. So if you're dealing with someone like that, you might be talking about a much longer time, and it might be the case that the beta cells can't refunction. Though I would say to that actually they've shown with fasting mimicking diets, which are what it says on the tin, diets that mimic fasting essentially, which is a very, very low calorie diet for a period of time, can actually reverse beta cell dysfunction. Although again, this is like quite novel stuff and quite controversial. So if anyone was really, there would be people who maybe they need a much longer period of time on a low carbohydrate diet, or maybe they need to be on a low carbohydrate diet forever, and they find that they manage their blood glucose fine, but they eat they're not very good at eating carbohydrates at all. Other people maybe who are very dedicated could do a sort of fasting mimicking diet, which it's not going to be easy. That's tough, but you do that for a period, and you might find that you actually regain some insulin production.
That's interesting. That's very interesting. I think I don't want to overcomplicate it. I would love to really go into that and nerd out, but I don't want to overcomplicate this.
I don't want to get too complex either. So when I say something, just please pull me up, because I don't want.
No, because that's where I stop falling down a rabbit hole as well.
Yeah.
And then we start discussing the possibilities of it and why we think it's happening. And is it autophagy? Is it stem cell? We start this.
Yeah, exactly.
I've got another question. So people, it might take like 3 months. It might some people a lot longer, depending on your beta cells as well. So it's different for each person. Yeah. Someone asked, is orange juice watered down bad for blood sugar? They're getting bored and don't want to increase their fizzy drink intake. If it is, what alternatives do you suggest that might not have such an influence on blood sugar?
Yes, I'd say it is. I think any liquid. I don't think we should be eating liquid calories at all, in any form, really. I don't think you should really. I think you should drink water. And I know for a lot of people that might sound, really boring. I agree, but if you have been drinking, soft drinks and orange juice, water is boring. But you kind of have to go through a period sometimes where you get through that, and it's not boring anymore.
What about kombucha?
Yeah, so kombucha. Nothing wrong with kombucha. Kombucha being the fermented sort of probiotic drink. And often you have a lot of the sugars is reduced because it's fermented out. But I wouldn't be suggesting sort of drinking sweet drinks that can rapidly spike blood glucose for someone with type 2 diabetes, or far down the line insulin resistance. I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think that's the number one priority. If we go through a process where that gets a lot better, and then down the line, you want to incorporate that into your diet for whatever reason, maybe you think it will improve your gut health, fine. But when you've got frank diabetes or insulin resistance, orange juice, I think that's something that you can just leave behind. let's focus on foods that aren't going to do that, and not focus on severely restricting. Like we said, have a load of eggs. That's probably more calories than most people have for breakfast. That's fine. That's not going to do stuff to your blood glucose like orange juices. I find that, believe it or not, putting a pinch of salt in water can make it more interesting. I mean, again, if you're coming off some like a diet where you're drinking Cokes and orange juice and stuff like this, nothing's going to taste. Everything's going to be boring. You've got to retrain your palate to be interested in other stuff.
That's what I want to bring up. Hedonic adaptations. So like we adapt we adapt to anything. I think I saw someone, it takes about 21 days. And then I guess the longer you build a habit, the longer it's going to take to lose a habit if it's really ingrained into you. But what I've found from trying a lot of different diets is the foods that I believe I cannot live without, I'll leave them out, and then when I go back to them, I'm like, why was I so not all foods, but with certain ones, like why was I so in love with this? I mean, I love eggs. I'll always love eggs. Love cheese, of course. But like, I mean, why not think about what foods you can have on this diet? You can have steak.
Yeah. So it's really when someone comes in and they want a big change, even though they're willing for it, you find a lot of people resistant to cutting out certain things. I like to focus on, depending where the person is psychologically. Some people will come in and they're ready to make whatever change. They've had enough. That's fine. Other people think they are, but there might be some mental barriers there, and you've got to work with that, because you want to help everyone the same. And I think it's good to talk about what you should increase in your diet in that case. So rather than focusing on the orange juice, let's focus on stuff that's going to control your appetite. So I'm not saying you should limit protein, for instance. Protein, and the great thing about protein is, apart from all the other stuff it does in your body, build muscle, make neurotransmitters, all that stuff, and that's why it's essential, it's the most satiating macronutrient. That's going to keep you not wanting to eat other food. That's great. We can increase that. Other vegetables, fibrous vegetables. Fibrous vegetables, they're kind of, in terms of satiety mechanism, they increase your satiety, so you don't want to eat, and hardly contain any calories. So, things like that, that's what you should focus on. And it depends where the person's at. You've got to meet them where they're at. For some people, it might literally be, okay, this week, just focus on increasing your protein. Try and hit this target. And that's it. And you'll find that when you see them next week, if they've done, for just 1 week, they focused on that one thing, you might find because they've increased their protein, they've eaten a lot less of the stuff they shouldn't be having, because they've achieved the satiety. Okay, now you've done that, let's add another thing next week. So I think that's important. And like you said, steak is a great food. It's a perfectly healthy thing to eat, as it will not affect your blood sugar. It gives you a great amount of sort of nutrition and protein. Eat that. People sort of restrict steak for. Well, I mean, this is another rabbit hole we could go down. Of think once a week or some nonsense like that. But you can eat that every day if you want. It certainly works. So yeah. So to the orange juice thing, I would not recommend drinking liquid calories, particularly liquid like sugar calories. If you've got type 2 diabetes, that's really going to spike your blood sugar. That's going to create sort of glycemic controls issues. So yeah, I would try and get used to water. Tea is fine, coffee's fine, and then and maybe like fizzy water or something. Fizzy water is quite a good way of weaning off like sweet drinks, actually. So yeah.
I like fizzy water.
Yeah.
Okay, Dorian, what's your favourite food then?
My favourite food is, without a shadow of a doubt, is steak, all kinds. I sort of rotate different kinds of steak. So I like at the moment I'm going through bavette steak. Bavette is kind of.
What's that?
Yeah. Really, I think it's from the flank. It's like a flank steak. It's quite chewy. I really like it. Yeah.
Oh,
something else.
Yeah, no, because you showed me that place where you can get Wagyu steaks as well. That was amazing. I had to bookmark that. I made a flank steak, slow cooked yesterday. Is incredible. Absolutely Absolutely, absolutely incredible. I've got loads of veggies inside there. You leave it for a day. You put some cumin. You put I forgot what that spice is. It's like a little star-shaped thing. You put it inside there. Bit of salt and
I
leave
know what
it.
you're
And
talking about.
yeah, and it's absolutely incredible. In fact, I've got some.
Yeah.
I've got some left after this podcast, but I'm quite excited to have it.
Yeah, I like that. I also like short ribs actually. Short ribs are
Ooh,
it's a great hack 'cause they're super cheap.
mhm.
They're like a cheapest cut. And what you do is you just throw them in a Le Creuset, basically like a heavy pot. Put about salt them well, and then put about sort of an inch of water in there, and then just leave that on 80 degrees for about 24 hours. So just stick it in the oven, take 5 minutes to prepare, and leave it for and it literally just it falls off the bone. That's an awesome dish.
I think I've tried some. I think I've had some before. I think I got a very fatty cut of it, and a bit too fatty cut of it. But like
Yeah.
I've tried some, and it is nice. You know what? We've got some nice recipes from Joanna. Like we've got to try some. Like
Yeah.
she's making some
Yeah,
really.
well, if people come to Biospan, they'll have loads of recipes. So that's for sure.
Mm. So next question. What are your thoughts on trendy diets? They've seen posts about people advocating for keto, vegan, intermittent fasting, etc.
Yeah.
But they've been advised that diets like keto diet is too harsh for their metabolism, and they should start with Atkins. And so the question is, what factors and comorbidities should be taken into account to see whether a diet is appropriate for you or not as a type 2 diabetes patient?
I'd like to know who says keto's too harsh. Try Atkins. That just doesn't make any.
Yeah, that's what I was like. They moved from Atkins to keto. I think keto is quite not controversial, but there's more and more information coming out about it.
Okay, so diets are completely made up. It's a human word to say diet and then categorize things. Although technically, I suppose we are talking about what diet you should eat. But I have given some general suggestions. But I've also said there'll be individual nuance depending on where you are in the journey and everything like that. So I don't think I'd ever give a straight out the packet, here, eat this, depending on what your preferences are, depending on where you are in your journey, depending on tests and blood markers. I said low carbohydrates, and that's also going to look different for people. That can be 150 grams of carbs for someone. It can be less than 50 for someone else. And I'm not thinking keto diet. I don't really. The keto diet technically is a 50 grams of carbs or less, 15% protein, not too high protein, and then the rest fat. And I don't like that because I don't think you're getting enough protein. I want people to be focusing on protein for many reasons, muscle building in particular, which we haven't really touched on with resistance training. I don't know if that might come up later, but if you want to be more insulin sensitive, build more muscle. You're just like that's hacking insulin sensitivity. You're literally adding more cells where you can put glucose. I like high protein, so I guess you could say maybe it's a modified keto. I don't like to label it. So a keto diet written like that is actually the whole invention was therapeutic for people who have epilepsy, where it's been shown to have some benefit in terms of reducing seizures, and then also like glioblastoma, which is a specific kind of brain tumor, has been shown to have effect if you reduce carbohydrates that much, and then you want to jack up your ketones as much as possible. Jacking up your ketones by basically limiting your protein. So unless specifically we're talking about those conditions, I don't really, I wouldn't say you're on a keto diet, you're on an Atkins diet. It's just a reduced carbohydrate, and it would be what we discussed, and it would be set to you depending on where you are. So that's the first thing. And then other diet trends are trash. They really are. They're off. There's no science supporting any diet really. There's no, nutritional science there's a lot of sketchy nutritional science. It's all very observational and correlational. We don't know what causative is, and the main thing is we're kind of studying an unhealthy population of people. That's massive, right? So we don't really know what to infer. You're looking at people there are studies to suggest that like 88% of people are metabolically unhealthy. And that's why, at the sharp end of that, we're seeing a massive rise in obesity and things like diabetes. And we can go into that maybe later as to why that might be. But I would not Google anything about diets as an advice. I wouldn't. I think the advice I've given here is sound, although you can't apply it to yourself where the individual nuances could be, but you could try a few things with those. But ultimately, I think like if you had a nutritional therapist, you could sort of really nail that down. And I've made other videos on things you can try as well. But yeah, I think diet trends are trash. And what other diet trends did you mention?
Intermittent fasting, vegan.
There's a place for intermittent fasting. Again, it's not for everyone. I mean, what the place is, you shouldn't be eating at night, right? I think people have maybe an 8-hour fast. Most people have like an 8 or 9-hour fast. That's ridiculous overnight. That's you should be doing 12 hours. But that's not intermittent fasting. That's normal. That's like, okay, it's night time. My body's shutting down to sleep. I'm not going to eat. And then now it's morning time. It's day. I'm ready to eat again. And we have science saying, you have your metabolism functions better at certain times of the day, usually in the light. So that's fine. If that helps you eat less or maintain body composition or whatever, then intermittent fasting can be a good tool. My issue with intermittent fasting, again, is set rules. It's set rules, and that you can't have set rules for everyone. I think if you're on a goal to sort of build muscle, it can actually inhibit that in some people, and also in females in particular, it can sort of mess up hormones. So again, I'm not dismissing that. We can use that, but it varies person to person. I think you like intermittent fasting. It works very well for you.
Yeah, that's how I got into health, and that's my thing. I love fasting. It's not for everyone.
A metabolically healthy, sort of like 21-year-old guy.
22. Almost 23.
23. Yeah, that's very different from like someone who's got type 2 diabetes. So, but that doesn't mean I wouldn't use it. It depends, is the answer. So it depends. And then the other one you said is vegan, and that's just is basically driven by ethics. So there's a lot of people who feel very passionately about that due to ethics of killing animals, and we can get into that as well, because if you want to go down that rabbit hole, and also money, because you can make a shed load of money out of cheap food that you can patent and make a fake burger out of, that you can't do with beef. The reality is people who farm in this country don't make much money on the pound of beef. It's not hugely profitable, but you can make some burger thing, and you can patent that, and then you can make tons of money out of it. So that's really what's driving this. And all trends are trash, really.
Yeah, it's just
and they come and they go. So
yeah. There's something I wanted to say when you're saying about all trends are trash. We are studying an unhealthy population. The science is so sketchy. Well, the thing is, like, if you want validation for any diet, you can go online and find it. For any diet. But like at the end of the day, you have to look in the mirror and see your own results. That's the only way to measure.
Exactly, you'll see anecdotes that people change their lives, and we just can't put too much on this. We can't put too much on it, really. I like the evidence. I like to be evidence based, but not evidence limited. And then you have to, think sometimes a bit commonsensically about what people should be eating or what does what. So. I hope I gave a good enough answer to that question. I wouldn't follow diet trends generally.
And we have more questions, but you said you wanted to go in there talk about muscle, and I think we should, because I think you've really opened my eyes up a lot into because muscle, when talk about muscle isn't just about working out. Muscle is nutrition as well. Muscle is sleep. Muscle is your sink. Can you explain the role of muscle in type 2 diabetes, please?
Yeah. Well, let's just talk about the role of muscle in anything or anyone. Okay, so there's a sort of a trendy statement going around, which you may not have heard. Muscle's the organ of longevity, which is true. When we get to over 60, we find that the people who live longest are the people with the most muscle, and there's a good reason for that. There's that old medical expression, break your hip, die of pneumonia. And that's because it's extremely common that people fall and break their hip, and their mortality goes through the roof, basically, because or through the floor, whichever way they're more likely to die basically. And it's because they end up in hospital and they get like pneumonia or something, and then it's sort of a downward spiral. And they broke their hip because they were frail, bluntly. It's frailty. And with, if you want to talk about recently, COVID-19, frailty was massively correlated with increased mortality in the old. And when you're frail, you are more likely to die. And that's, the 60-year-olds who are doing better, they're not sort of meatheads or anything like that. They just have more muscle. I think you can't really tell from looking at someone, especially at that age, because they might be the same weight, they might be the same size, but it's the increased lean mass that's important. So that's one thing. If we're talking about type 2 diabetes specifically, so muscle is it's an expression of health to have muscle. There's certain things your body has to do to get more muscle, and all of them are healthy, they're good for you. We used to think fat and muscle were these sort of benign like coverings on our body. Fat was energy and muscle was this just mechanical covering that allowed us to move and do stuff. But now we now know they communicate. There's a bidirectional communication between the body, between fat and muscle.
Really?
Fat and the body and sort of muscle in the body. So they're actually, for all intents and purposes, they're like an endocrine organ, really.
That's incredible.
So too much fat signals for things that aren't healthy, like sort of increased levels of low-level inflammation and stuff. And muscle increases for things that are healthy. Particularly for women, I found, muscle balances hormones like nothing else. It can just balance hormones amazingly. I'm sure we can go into mechanisms for that, but it really is good at that. Just gaining more muscle. And when I say gaining more muscle, it's not just you sit there and you get more muscle. Doing the things that require your body to send the signal to build muscle, which is essentially resistance training, basically. Go and lift heavy things, and the body kind of sorts it out itself. If you think about it evolutionarily, you're not going to have the ability to build muscle unless you're in a really good place. You've got plenty of food, you're pretty relaxed, you're happy. It's kind of a luxury evolutionarily. It's an expensive tissue, which I'll come back to in a second. It sends signals for health in your body. When it comes to diabetes, the massive thing is, muscle is where you put most of your blood sugar. That's where you put most of your energy and fat. That's where it all gets burned, in the muscle cells. You are literally increasing your capacity to dispose of glucose, and that's literally the problem in diabetes. Is you are not able to dispose of glucose. And something we spoke about the other day is muscle cells have receptors that can allow glucose in independently of insulin. There's a kind of receptor called glucose.
That's what I found super interesting. Even if you don't have, even if you're insulin resistant, your muscles can still take in glucose.
Yeah, exactly.
That's incredible. Mm.
Yeah. So this is the problem, and I would actually go on to hypothesize that maybe the metabolic dysfunction epidemic is more to do with lack of muscle than it is to do with too much fat. Although obviously too much fat is a side effect from that. But if you eat a lot of calories and you eat a lot of protein and you do resistance training, appropriately scaled resistance training, I don't think the impact's going to be the same as if you just eat a lot of calories and you don't do anything. Makes sense.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
It makes sense for someone listening. So, I guess what we find out is, the more muscle you have, the more you can get rid of more glucose. And then, of course, there's all the other benefits of muscle as well. So it's bidirectional. So it's not just you can get rid of something and muscles communicate back to your body. And we can go into like all the benefits. But I guess the question which will be on someone's mind is, the gyms are closed. I live at home. And like I can't order weights anywhere. I don't know how to stock. Like, what can I do? Do I go for a run? Like, I struggle to move. Like, what do we do?
So the key is, I said, appropriately scaled. So it depends where you are in terms of if you've had an experience with weight training or you don't. Okay, so barbells and dumbbells are probably the best way of getting results, but it depends where you are. If you're listening to this and you can only just get out of your chair, that's where you start with movements like that. If you can only do press-ups off your knees, that's where you start. That's fine. Anything you do that it builds more resistance training volume on what you have been doing will build muscle. We're not looking to win the Olympics here or compete on a bodybuilding stage. We just want to make more muscle than we have now. There are 6 fundamental human movements. Okay, squat, hip hinge, bending over at the waist, a push, any push, in front of you or over your head, a pull, like pulling like this or a row or something, gait, which is walking or running, and twist, so twisting to the side. So the main ones we really, you should be getting your gait, and you can work on twisting as you're doing general stuff around the house or walking. The main ones we want to do we want to do the squat, hip hinge, push and a pull. That's your workout. You do a squat exercise for 1 to 4 sets, depending on your stamina abilities. You do a hip hinge, you do a push, and you do a pull. And again, I'm reluctant to give recommendations because this is going to be so different. A young man or woman can probably start properly weight training. If you're at that sort of level, I would say great alternatives at home are bands. You can get very heavy bands now. I think you've been doing some band workouts, haven't you?
Yeah, I've been using band. I made my own board. So I went to where did I get B&Q's, and I got loads of hoops around as well. And I got this lining on top. It's black around the sides. Got these clips, and I've got my bands inside it. The only thing is bands do break. So if you're watching this, bands can break, and so you've got to be careful not to wrap them around each other. That you have to be quite creative, but they're good. I'm getting a lot better workouts than I can get at the gym, and the good thing about them is you can use them for any strength, and you can do exercises with very little movement. So I have this leg exercise where all I have to do is just wrap this band around my legs and just move my leg. I'm literally not even really moving from where I am at all, but I'm still gaining muscle by doing it. And so the barrier to entry is very low, which is quite nice.
Exactly. And I mean, again, we could go on about this, but there's good resources online for like band workouts, full body band workouts where you can incorporate all those movements. A kettlebell, if you can just get a kettlebell, you can do like a sumo deadlift, a goblet squat, you can do rows, and you can do some probably overhead presses with that. So just a kettlebell, you can have a full body workout, no problem. And then, if you are someone who is older and you've never done this before, you can start with literally getting up from a chair. That's a box squat. You sit down in the chair, you get up, that's a box squat. Toe touches. I mean, if you're, single leg toe touches are extremely challenging. Actually, you probably want to start with this double leg toe touches. I heard a statistic. I'm not sure if it's true. That 50% of 70-year-olds can't properly extend their arm above their head. So
Really?
a can of beans, just a can of beans, and doing this, that is resistance training. So yeah, you can do this is not necessarily require the gym. If you're in a state where you have metabolic dysfunction, the odds are that there's no question you can build muscle. There's even studies on this saying that older people in their 80s build muscle fine. Anything you do, you adapt to, and the day you stop adapting is actually the day you die. Every day you're adapting to your environment. So there's loads of stuff you can do. That's for sure.
Okay. Dorian, what motivates you to work out? You're a big man. I know you're hitting I know you're going for your 240 deadlift. What is it that motivates you to work out?
Yeah, I just caveat that anyone listening to this who's serious about training knows that that's not that impressive. But I'm an average guy who loves training. What motivates me is, to be honest, I'm a really bad person to talk to about this because I just love it, and I have my whole life. Even when I was sick, I used to do this. So this was not like a part of my problem. I have got better and smarter in how I train as I got older, because most of the time you have to as you get older. but I just love it. I mean, I hope to do this till the day I die, but yeah, it's my hobby pretty much. So that's why I'm a bad example, because I know a lot of people listen to that and they think it's just boring. I'm not interested. And my wife's like this. My wife is not interested in resistance training at all. And we have like a kettlebell in the kitchen, especially now since it's been like lockdown stuff, so she hasn't been doing that much. And every now and then she'll go and do like 15 sumo deadlifts or something. So she sort of doesn't take, you don't have to train like me because I love it. You can just do that sort of thing, and that works fine.
Interesting. Okay. Do you have a workout song recommendation for someone who just wants to start, get going? Do you have a song recommendation to get going?
A song recommendation.
Song recommendation.
Oh God, you probably don't want to ask me that either. I mean, I'm a metal guy, so I'm going to say Slipknot or something like that.
Yeah. Oh no, I like Slipknot. So you hear it come on in as well, so.
Yeah. So like I'm generally, when I'm working out, I'm listening to podcasts, and then if I'm for my like big sets, I'll put on like Slipknot, which is, again, most people listening to this are not going to want to do that. So.
Well, it definitely gets you hyped. Okay. Well, you know what? I think that's good. I think we've addressed quite a lot in one video, actually. Okay. We've got a lot more questions, but I think if we just get this out there, show everyone, get feedback back, get some more questions in. I think it's a good podcast. What's your thoughts?
I really enjoyed it, and like I know there's no stupid questions. There are no stupid questions. That's for sure. None of these questions, these are all very good questions. And I think me and Maxi as well, we'd really like to actually just really engage with you. So really, really ask anything, and we'll go from there. If you want
to get involved in a podcast, if you want to share a story, if you know anyone who would like to get involved, then by all means just contact us. We'd like to hear some of your stories out there, see how nutrition has affected your life, see maybe some of the struggles you've had as well, and understand maybe how nutrition and lifestyle can help. Yeah,
that'd be cool.
Yeah. Right. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next time. So,
bye.